The city of San Francisco may be recognized for its iconic Golden Gate Bridge. Still, it's also famous for another attraction, Alcatraz. Alcatraz is an island prison renowned for its isolation and harsh conditions. Situated in San Francisco Bay, it has housed some of America's most notorious criminals. And now, it's just a $50 tourist attraction. But why is it so famous? And what was it like for prison inmates who spent their sentences here? Let's look closely at all of that and more in today's video. Alcatraz is perhaps the most famous prison in all of America. And why shouldn't it be? I mean, look at its location. It's in the middle of the chilly ocean, 1.25 miles off San Francisco Bay, California. A pretty isolated and hard to escape place, right? Even if a prisoner managed to escape the walls of this maximum security prison, they would still need to swim through the cold water for at least an hour to reach land. However, this is only possible if we disregard the strong currents, cold temperatures, and unpredictable conditions of the water surrounding the island. Maybe that's why it's also called the Rock. Alcatraz was built in the 19th century on this 22-acre land and served as a military fortress. Later, in 1934, when crimes were at their peak during the Prohibition era, it was transformed into a federal maximum security prison. So what is there actually? The main features of the island include the penitentiary building, which houses the cells, dining hall, library, and administrative offices. The prison grounds included exercise yards, guard towers, and a lighthouse. There were 4 cell blocks containing 336 small and sparsely furnished cells, each measuring no bigger than 10 feet by 4.5 feet, which I guess is more than enough if you have committed horrendous crimes and are locked up as punishment. There were also 42 solitary cells, and that block was called the Hole. Why? Because those prisoners were only limited to one 10-minute shower and an hour of exercise in the yard a week. The rooms had steel doors with no visibility, and meals were given through a small slot in the door. Among these confinement cells, the worst one was called the Oriental or the Strip Cell, which had absolutely nothing but a hole in the floor for a toilet. Here, the prisoner would be kept naked with nothing else for 2 days. Most times, the rest of the cell wasn't big enough to even stretch arms without touching the walls on either side. They were cramped with very little natural light and ventilation. For furnishing, you would only have a bed, a small desk, a wash basin, a toilet on the back wall, and little or no privacy. For communal purposes, there was a mess hall where all the inmates would gather for meals and the recreation yard where they had limited outdoor time for exercise and leisure activities. So, what would a typical day at Alcatraz look like for a prisoner? The morning whistle would sound at 6:30 a.m., and after waking up, every inmate would have to make their beds, place everything in its place, clean up their wash basin and toilet bowl, wipe and sweep the floor, fold their table seat against the wall, wash and dress for the day. Looks like an ideal morning routine set by a mom, right? The prisoners would be counted and taken to the mess for breakfast. One thing about Alcatraz was that the food there was better than other prisons. Inmates received 3 meals a day, typically consisting of simple but nutritious foods such as oatmeal or cereal for breakfast, followed by a lunch of soup, sandwiches, or leftovers from the previous day's dinner. Supper was the largest meal of the day, featuring a main course of meat, potatoes, and vegetables, followed by a dessert like pie, cake, or ice cream. The inmates could get as much food as they wanted, but the rule was never to waste any of it. Before we continue, please take 2 seconds to help me out. Hit like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video so far. Each like and subscribe helps support this channel and keeps me motivated to keep making you valuable content. Thank you. Now back to the video. Alcatraz was reputed to be highly strict and the most secure prison in the United States. Inmates were required to adhere to a rigid schedule, beginning with a morning wake-up call and ending with lights out in the evening. Uniforms were mandatory attire, and everyone was supposed to shower regularly and wear clean clothes at all times. There were at least a dozen daily checks, and movement was tightly controlled. The guards would monitor every activity. Any deviation from the established rules was met with swift disciplinary action, and it could result in horrifically alone solitary confinement without any privileges. Something crazy was that during the 1930s, the first warden of the prison, James Johnson, did not even permit anyone to speak at all. The only times when inmates could talk was during mealtimes and recreation periods, and if someone was caught breaking this rule, then it was trouble and a trip to the hole. But this rule didn't survive that long, and they were relaxed when they realized that there weren't enough isolation cells to hold everyone who broke the rule. The brutality of the prison goes even further. Inmates also faced physical punishment such as beatings and sensory deprivation. Those who broke the rules were chained up in total darkness and beaten regularly. While Alcatraz housed notorious criminals from various backgrounds, a few famous ones included Robert Stroud, also known as the Birdman of Alcatraz, who gained notoriety for his violent behavior and became a self-taught expert in birds, or an ornithologist, during his 54 years in prison. Oh, and 42 years of them were in solitary confinement. No distractions must have helped him with his studies, I guess. Another famous figure who spent his days here was none other than the notorious gangster Al Capone. That man also had a thing for music, particularly banjo playing. His good behavior earned him a spot in the Alcatraz prison band, the Rock Islanders, which gave regular Sunday concerts for other inmates. Alcatraz could hold around 300 prisoners, but it never reached its full capacity because of the island's high security standards and limited infrastructure. The island was also the home of the prison guards and their families living on site, so that security measures could be maintained around the clock. Kids had to take a boat to school every day since there weren't any schools on the island. Every time someone needed groceries or other stuff, they had to take a boat ride to the mainland. Even though there was no farming or manufacturing on the island, there were fun things to do, like going to the movies. But life there was a bit strange. Kids couldn't play with toy guns because a prisoner might try to take one and trick a guard. And magazines had to be carefully torn up because prisoners weren't allowed to know about what was happening outside. Like every prison, Alcatraz also had some escape attempts, but none of them really succeeded in reaching freedom. At least 36 inmates tried to gain freedom with 14 separate escape attempts. One of the most famous attempts occurred in 1962 when Frank Morris, along with brothers John and Clarence Anglin, planned their escape. Using makeshift tools fashioned from spoons and other materials, they chipped away at the ventilation grates in their cells over several months. On the night of June 11, 1962, the trio escaped through the holes they had created and reached the roof. From there, they came down to the ground using a makeshift raft from raincoats. Despite an extensive search effort by authorities and ongoing speculation about their fate, Morris and the Anglin brothers were never seen again. It remains unclear whether they successfully reached the mainland or perished in the frigid waters of San Francisco Bay. Another famous attempt was in 1946 when a group of inmates overpowered guards and seized weapons during a failed escape bid. There were gunfires that resulted in the death of several inmates and guards. On March 21, 1963, Alcatraz closed its doors as a federal prison, mainly due to the high operational costs associated with maintaining the facility. Despite its reputation as an escape-proof prison, the aging infrastructure and remote island location made it increasingly expensive to operate. The prisoners' harsh living conditions and reputation for brutality also contributed to its closure, as public opinion shifted towards more humane treatment of inmates. Following its closure as a prison, Alcatraz underwent various changes in ownership and designation before eventually becoming part of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. Today, it stands as a National Historic Landmark and popular tourist destination, offering visitors insights into its intriguing history. So, would you like to travel to this island prison and see what it was like to be a prisoner there? Tell us in the comments. If you're curious to know more about the famous American gangster Al Capone, click on the thumbnail shown on the screen, and I'll see you there.